why do you want to get into Oxford? In this chamber where you've had Gladstone, Churchill, Reagan, Malcolm X, the Queen, like all of these people come and speak. It shouldn't just be because it's Oxford. It shouldn't just be it's the best. It shouldn't just be all of that, right? Those are very difficult academic pursuits. Those are meant to be extremely educational, and Oxford does very well to teach you that.
And since you got there?
The last year and a half, almost 2 years now, have been by far the most formative years of my life, in a way that the past 17 years couldn't even come close to comparing to.
How can that be normal?
If the people who are doing the hiring at McKinsey are the Oxford grads who got into McKinsey 5 years ago, you have a very unique connection with those people.
How cutthroat is student politics?
Extremely, with it to submit. So,
how many drafts did we do?
I don't remember, and I don't want to.
Do you think that there's greater geeking out in Cambridge than in Oxford?
No. Yeah, I think Cambridge is not worth anyone's time.
So disagree. Back in the day, do you think that the debating helped or hindered your Oxford interview?
I think it was an important part because it helped me learn how to structure my thoughts and speak clearly and precisely and build out the logic of the arguments. But the ability to step away from the need to argue and prove myself correct towards the more educational aspect of the interviews.
Teachability.
Where the point of the interview is to serve as a mini tutorial to see what you would be like when you are there, not to argue, not to prove yourself, but to learn and show that you have the capacity to learn.
To walk out of the tutorial with more information and more reflection than you had before.
More knowledge, yeah. That's something that I think only came throughout the process that we had. And that was a skill that had to be developed because, especially when it comes to Oxbridge, you care so deeply about it, about wanting to get in, about the whole process. You think, I need to prove myself to be the best, the smartest, the one who's correct at the very first go to be able to get in. I mean, if I reflected in my interview, right, there was, in my economics interview, the first question, it was a series of questions in an auction, and that wrapped up in 5 minutes because I just gave an immediate answer to each of the questions, which I assume was correct because there was no further discussion over the comment. The next question was a game theory problem, and I massively struggled with that one because I was just missing something critical in being able to figure out the solution. And when I later got to Oxford, my tutors told me that actually my thinking process in that one was what made them truly intrigued in the way I was approaching certain problems, even though I had assumed that that was a mistake I'd made. That was me done. That was me not going to get
This is this is a very interesting point. To what extent do you think that students often try to mind read and about what the interviewers are thinking and then adapt their answers to what they're perceiving rather than just going with the flow?
I think it's extremely human and very likely that most people do that. I think before the interview, when you get yourself to the level of confidence where you know, even if you are wrong or right, it doesn't matter. You know that what you're saying isn't stupid, then that's a level of confidence that you need to take into the interview because you can be wrong. You just can't. You can't be wrong in an extremely stupid way. I think is the nicest way to put it.
You can't be wrong in an extremely stupid way. I completely agree with you. I think it's just much more about being excited and being curious about, okay, what am I, as you said, what am I missing? What can I learn from this? How can I actually develop? How can I get something out of having this conversation?
I mean, the point is honestly, as cliche as it sounds, to have fun. Because, when you get there, like the tutorials are fun. You do look forward to them, right? You get to have like an interesting conversation about a topic that you're definitely at least a little bit passionate about with somebody who's very, very good at that subject and can teach you more about it. And honestly, in some ways, there have been tutorials where the tutors have learned just as much as we have because we bring perspectives and ideas and analysis to the stage. I mean, very recently, for example, like we had an Eastern European professor. She didn't know much about India. We had a fascinating discussion where we learned a lot more about Eastern European politics. She got a crash course in India because she had 3 people, one from the US, one from the UK, and one from India sitting in the room who'd all grown up as part of the diaspora.
And was there some sort of, international resolutions? Was there something that came out of this that you would now take forward after having that conversation?
I think not a resolution, but it was definitely a matter of perspective. It's the best form of the argument is one that actually makes you think about it, makes you maybe believe in it, makes you think more critically about the own position you've adopted. The second one is just forcing yourself to consume as much media from as many sources as possible. I would strongly recommend Ground News. I do think it's very, very good. That's the platform which shows you different stories and how much has been reported upon it by left-leaning sources, by right-leaning sources, and by centre sources.
How culturally diverse is that?
It's quite culturally diverse. It deals with issues around the world. Of course, there's like a US-centric focus, but that's to be expected with most of these. I think if you are looking to expand your knowledge, one, break away from this US-centric hegemony, most certainly. Like that's extremely important. You need to read magazines, articles, journals, YouTube channels that are built and focused on their own region of the world, that come from that perspective, that aren't trying to tell the world in the context of the United States, but are trying to tell the world in the context of what they view it as.
I think the use of your word hegemony there was spot on, and again, the whole narrative around the Russia-Ukraine thing and the warped perspectives and the lack of people prepared to take a step back and actually look at things from a historical perspective.
I think a lot of people, I mean, I've heard the statement so many times, right? Which is, how can you not be emotional about this issue? This issue matters. Like, people are dying, tortures are happening, war crimes are being committed. Like, how do you not care? Why are you not more upset about this? The problem is, so you need to know when to utilize those emotions, and you need to know when to keep them in check. And that doesn't mean not having those emotions in the first place. That just means that it's important to realize that they're not necessarily useful in this, and building forums where there is enough of a mutual respect, if not for each other, at least for the forum where the discussion is happening, that individuals are willing to put aside their personal enmity or emotions to engage in a dialogue or discussion with each other, is something that's worthwhile to have.
Because you did a lot of work with the union and the debate. Do people genuinely change their point of view based upon the ability to argue, of presenters' ability to argue, or
it's rare, but I have seen it happen. It has genuinely been convincing. There have been debates where we expected a certain result and we did not see that result.
Could you give an example for that? Do you remember?
There was one I think about. This House believes that British museums are not very British, which is about the colonial artifacts that had been stored in the British Museum. And the general assumption was everyone was going to vote for the motion. They were going to agree with it. We had a speech in opposition from one of the first Maori MPs from New Zealand. And it was an incredibly strong speech that basically focused on the argument of, it is necessary in the correct historical context to note that these artifacts don't exist in their countries of origin. They exist in the United Kingdom, because that tells the story of colonialism in a far stronger way than any plaque or any memorial could. The difficulty of accessing these artifacts for the people whose culture they come from, and the difficulty to access them, and the fact that they don't exist in their own culture, is a very real and visceral reminder of the fact that the effects of colonialism have not left the world, that they linger on. To remove those artifacts from the museum would be to take away one of the strongest reminders of an issue that still has to be dealt with. And you could see people changing their minds about which way they were going to vote over the course of that speech. And then there was almost an overwhelming majority for the opposition.
Okay, this is a great example of where you're at now in terms of your logic, your thinking, your structuring, etc., etc. So what about the arc of where you've come from when we first spoke to where we are now?
When we first spoke, Gwyn made me feel like I didn't know how to speak English, which was definitely a fun experience. I don't remember a lot, but I do remember.
Does that mean you've deleted it?
No, it just was a long time ago.
Yeah.
I remember that we discussed Vietnam and just general Southeast Asian politics. I don't know why we ended up in Vietnam, because I did not know much about Vietnam, so that was not a good territory for me to venture into. But I do remember there were clear issues with how I was throwing around examples, how I was sort of getting my way through the logic of things that didn't really make sense. And also in the precision of language, so just the use of verbal tics, the reliance on certain substitute filler words that, honestly, while they don't change the composition, the logic of your argument, they do affect the persuasiveness of it, because there is just a lack of confidence that is belayed by those.
So again, taking it through the arc, okay, so the one-to-ones with me, but the interaction with Rostrum, but then moving forward, what have been the substantive changes that you've noted?
I think something that a lot of people fail to do, and this you'll see most likely in essays, is you just cite a ton of authors, and great, you've cited authors, right? You've shown that you've read. You haven't shown that you've understood, because there has been no synthesis of argumentation. There's been no cohesive build-up of what has been discussed, what has been said by different people. You've said, oh, XYZ said capitalism is bad, but ABCD said that capitalism is great. Fine, but there's no conclusion there. There's no interaction or interplay of the arguments themselves. The capacity to build that up, which is the original part of academic work that's quite important, was, I think, crucial to develop. Also, just being in a high pressure scenario, different to debate, because in debate, right, when I was in a high pressure scenario, right, you have the adrenaline running, you're aggressive, you want to win, you're mad that the other team is saying stupid shit, so you're like, I'm going to destroy you because stop saying
Well, the emotions coming in.
Yeah, the emotions are coming in. There are high pressure environments where you can do well because emotions push you through it. High pressure environments like your Oxford admissions interview are places where your emotions are not going to push you to do the right thing, where you need to have an ability to be motivated to push through that pressure, but do it in a more collected manner than in other ways. So I think the ability to develop that through interviews that simulated the level of pressure was quite useful.
And since you got there?
Yes. Since I got there, I think honestly, I never thought I'd say it, because I thought, oh, I've been through so much, like, I've experienced so much, going through high school. Like, I've had all these awesome experiences. Wow, like, I know who I am going into university. I can't believe I know who I am. And then I get there, and the last year and a half, almost 2 years now, have been by far the most formative years of my life, in a way that the past 17 years couldn't even come close to comparing to. So, I mean, there's a lot, right? The union especially was a very beneficial learning environment. I would say everything from organizing a ball for 600 people and figuring out the logistics. And
what sort of a budget for an event like that?
The budget we had was about £60,000, so quite tight to make it work. But I mean, that involved me running around the city and getting into people's cars and driving them around, because Oxford's impossible to navigate.
What about a little bit about how you divide your time between, or not only you, but some of your friends and people around? Generally speaking, how much is the division between the focus on the academics and the focus on the rest?
I would say, for most of the humanities students, the rest is far more important than the actual subject itself. And I think everyone would back up that statement. For STEM students and for medicine students, you should be very aware what you're signing up for, right? You are signing up for a hard, rigorous academic degree. Those are very difficult academic pursuits. Those are meant to be extremely educational, and Oxford does very well to teach you that. For the humanities degrees, frankly, there's a reason PPE is called the degree, right? Like places where things happen, right? And accordingly, people come there. You have politicians, celebrities, business people coming around all the time. The ability to make those connections, network with them, to build something that they can be a part of, they can support, or to work with them or challenge them in a very, very peer-on-peer way, is something that you see nowhere else. And accordingly, the place excites you, right? If everybody around you is working on some interesting project, if everybody around you is part of some big society that's doing something cool, you feel a bit out of place if you aren't also doing something. But more than that, you have a supportive network of people who can help you do that. You always have somebody who can put you in touch with somebody else, or who's willing to work on an idea with you, or who's willing to go out on a project with you. People who enjoy spending their time thinking and talking through problems are more than happy to work on those problems as well. And I think that's incredible, because you have these long established huge societies, some of them with millions and millions of pounds in budget that you can work on, or you can start up your own thing and have immense amounts of support and connections and faculty and student support to be able to do that.
So basically, you're saying that for humanities students, leaving aside STEM and medics, the hardest thing is just to get in.
Essentially, I would say that. Because also you don't get assessed until your third year. This is something a lot of people don't really seem to know about Oxford before they apply.
No exams?
No exams. You have
Take them through it, please, because it's like, this is...
So for most of the humanities degrees, there are 2 exams. There are exams at the end of your first year because everybody does the same foundational first year course. And all you really need to do in these is, like, ideally you want to do 1, but frankly you just need to pass. But like, come on, you can get a 2-1. You can work towards a 2-1. It's a week and a half of intense studying. And that's just it. Then you move on to your second and your third year. You pick your subjects and you do your final exams in your third year. And the final exams in your third year are 100% of your degree. Definitely work towards it, but it doesn't hurt you. It doesn't harm you in any way. You have that freedom to make a mistake.
What about the feedback in tutorials?
So it varies widely because it's not as tight as some people think. It's very much essay feedback and tutorial feedback operate differently. Your essays can be weak, your tutorial performance can be strong, or it can be the other way around. And you get the 2 feedbacks differently. For me, what it's been is you usually get essay feedback in terms of the marked and annotated essay that your tutor emails to you. And you go through it. It talks about your writing style, your argumentation style, the basics of essay writing and what's actually looked for in the assessment of that and how that can improve. The tutorial itself, it's more about talking through the ideas, working them out, developing them, being clear on them, essentially just having a discussion on one of the concepts that have been picked up. And that's a lot more about getting clarity of thought and getting stronger ideas and fundamentals built about the things that you're arguing, so that the essay that you eventually do write is built on far clearer ideas of what you're actually arguing than the essay that you originally wrote. It can be a jarring transition. I think, of course, I think honestly, state school kids more often in the UK seem to have a harder transition when going to places like Oxford and Cambridge rather than students who've come from private schools internationally. I think that might have something to do with the fact that a lot of the culture of education in private schools is replicated globally. But I would say, in all, it's very hard to generalize any one group's performance. It does really depend on your own individual circumstances and the way that you're likely to adjust. But I think having academic curiosity, you've done well, like you did the interviews. The benchmark that the tutor set for themselves is, if we're going to admit this person, they should be able to at least get a 2-1. That means that they think that there is a potential in your arguments, in your ideas, in your structure to have that level of performance. Having that faith in yourself and embracing the academic life at Oxford in your own pace is honestly all you really need to be able to adjust there.
Interesting, because you mentioned, and I completely agree from what I've seen and heard and from many other past students, suddenly having that freedom, that space to do whatever you want, when you want, and yet knowing that you're at Oxford and there are high expectations of you. How do you deal with that?
I think, one, the whole you're at Oxford aspect does go away after a few weeks. And there are times where all of a sudden you look around and it hits you, but a lot of the times you sort of just forget that, like, you are at this place, right? Like, it just becomes university. But I will say the whole aspect of freedom is quite strange because...
Sorry, I was just thinking that it was what you said before, that it's absolutely normal, and then you said, but yeah, there are ambassadors and you're meeting. How can that be normal?
It sort of becomes normalized over time, I guess. Of course, like, it is constantly a privilege and a shock to be there. Sometimes you're just like, God, I don't want to get up today. Or sometimes you're just like, sometimes it just feels like university. And sometimes it feels like, well, honestly, more of the time it feels like the most special place in the world. But I will say, in terms of academic freedom, it's really just about realizing that there's so much opportunity over there. The entire point of Oxford is you have to go and get it done for yourself, right? Nobody is sitting there to spoon feed you. Nobody is interested in spoon feeding you. If you want to be a part of society, you need to take it up for yourself. If you want more feedback or more work or more academic engagement, you need to take that up for yourself. If you want to be more accountable to your own academic performance, you need to take that yourself, right? Your tutor will tell you, hey, that wasn't a good essay. But they're not going to be like, I'm really looking forward to reading your next essay. Please send me your next essay early, blah, blah. Like, sure, there might be some tutors who do that. The vast majority are just going to be like, that one was shit. That one was slightly less shit.
So it sounds like the best preparation many students could do for this is getting self-motivated and doing their independent research projects or doing exploratory work on some topic that is just interests them, going down some rabbit hole in their free time whilst they're at school, so that they get used to being self-motivated, self-active.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, so this actually goes back to what I was saying about PPE earlier, is the way I view the degree is genuinely there's a bit of a curve, right? It's very easy for most students, I think, who get into Oxford to be able to maintain the level of a 64, 65, so a mid-2 one. I think it's easy to get to that level without putting in too much work or too much effort or too much energy. But every point up from there is progressively harder and harder and harder. So it's really a degree where you can spend 10 hours on it in a week and submit a all right quality essay and be fine and move on. And frankly, it's good enough. It's just being a student who cares a lot about just doing something is important, right? Why do you want to get into Oxford? It shouldn't just be because it's Oxford. It shouldn't just be it's the best. It shouldn't just be all of that, right? There has to be something pushing you to do something in life, right? I think ambition is a key component in looking at admissions into these universities. I think it's something that they're also looking out for.
That's them. But if we consider the students, let's also consider parents of the students. I think many of the parents are focused on where getting into Oxford, where that's going to take you. The emphasis on the jobs, the careers, the opportunities through the networking, but also the opportunities through the people that you meet. I mean, I think you're going more of the startup route through people that you've met and opportunities that you've had, rather than actually seeking employment in a standard way.
It is a entire process in of itself, and the good thing is that the university is very, very supportive of that process, right? They have different career support networks that you can go to. So many of your tutors or heads of college or things like that are people who have done incredibly well in the professional world or incredibly well in the legal world and then moved into academic teaching or then come to Oxford, right? Having those contacts and that network available is a massive opportunity, but also it's sort of an open secret that nobody really likes to talk about out loud. But if the people who are doing the hiring at McKinsey are the Oxford grads who got into McKinsey 5 years ago, and the people doing the hiring at Slaughter and May are the Oxford grads who got in 5 years ago, I mean, 60% of all Magic Circle lawyers are Oxbridge graduates. And you see similar numbers in IB and consulting. You have a very unique connection with those people because Oxford and Cambridge are very unique experiences. And that helps, right? Because frankly, there's only so much one can do if you're looking to go into that finance bureau, consulting or lawyer type route. And at that point, the difference maker between you and a student from LSE or UCL or KCL or anywhere else could just be the fact that you can have a laugh about summer dates or about like Christmas traditions or some other Oxford or Cambridge quirk.
It's rapport.
Yeah, it's rapport. It makes it easier in a way that I think you won't have access to coming from other universities. But I'd also say the ability to do other things is definitely present. Entrepreneurship is nowhere near as prevalent in the UK as it is in the States. But I would say, at least in Oxford, there is a strong community and environment for it because you have people who want to do something interesting and who often identify that out to be starting something themselves rather than going into traditional employment paths. You also definitely have, I would say, at least from what I've seen, a lot more interest in politics than you would in a lot of other places. And that's a large batch of people who are growing up there and going to university there are people who eventually want to get into politics of some form. I think that's also very important to look at because the society elections, the SU elections, the Oxford Union, all of those combined with the politicians who have so much history and legacy and connections to Oxford and a constant presence there means that that's something that you have a lot more access to and an inside window into in a way that isn't available elsewhere.
Okay, just a couple of questions there. Is how cutthroat is student politics?
Extremely. It is worse than normal politics, I promise you. No one is willing to back down. No one is willing to not put their all into it. It is not pleasant. It is not pretty. It is not nice. It ruins friendships. It ruins reputations, it ruins mental health, it is very, very aggressive.
That almost sounds toxic.
It is toxic. I think it is toxic, but I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily that it's toxic, because frankly, it is a very illustrative experience of what real life is like. And I think from my conversations with some people who were part of that process years and years and years ago, who've now moved on into the real world in politics, a lot of them look back on that toxicity with almost some level of affection, because it's really a place that, while people are extremely nasty to each other, it's done with less consequence than there is in the real world.
Mm-hmm.
And that means that it is a educational tool in a useful way. And I don't think the toxicity is going anywhere. I think the toxicity is an important part of the experience. And as bad as it sounds, I think people at Oxford who get into student politics know exactly what they're signing up for.
It's you're all smart, right?
to them. I think people know what they're signing up for.
Did you get shocked? Was there anything that shocked you with regards to the level of ambition, shall we say?
I think a lot of people who end up at top universities often tend to be big fishes in small ponds in their own schools. And you're like, oh, I want to change the world. There's nobody who wants to change the world as much as me. There's nobody who wants to be prime minister as much as me. There's nobody who wants to be a billionaire as much as me. And then you get to places like Oxford or Cambridge or Harvard or Yale or Stanford, and you realize actually there are 1,000 people exactly like you who are equally skilled, who are equally ambitious. And it is a zero-sum game. Only some of you are going to win. I think recognizing that intellectually is one thing. Realizing that on a practical level and what it looks like in real life is an entirely different thing altogether. So even though you might be prepared for what it looks like, you don't actually realize what it's like until you see it happening in front of you.
Okay. I forgot, which college are you at?
Keble.
And how important do you think that choice was, and how did you go about it?
So I think choice of college is more important than people are willing to admit. Because there's this big idea of, oh, it's all just one university, like all colleges are made equal. All colleges are not made equal. The level of funding your college has, its location,
the college rich list?
The college rich list is important, right? Because, you have a college like St. John's, which is right next to Keble, and people in St. John's barely pay for food, barely pay for rent, because the college is so much money. And that is a benefit, right? You can afford to give your students more. You can afford to give your students more funding, more grants, more opportunities. More trips. That's not something that's available to all colleges. That does, I think, very directly impact your experience, especially if finances are something that's very important to you when considering your university experience. It's a huge change, right? You might all be paying the same fees. I think it does affect your experience a lot more than people are willing to.
And again, in terms of, because you are going to now have their support for life. It's not just about whilst you're studying there, but you're a member of the college for life, and I guess you'll be going back and going to the alumni events, etc., etc. What sort of support do you think you'll get from Keble moving forward?
I think it's huge in terms of the support that you're looking at. And with Keble, honestly, they're quite good, right? There are regular dinners that happen. There's one big formal dinner actually that comes up at the start of every Trinity term. And I remember there have been so many times where I met people and I've got along great with them, but it took them half an hour to warm up to me, because their first question to me was, are you a houseman? And I said no. And then I had to cross that boundary. And a houseman is somebody who went to Christchurch.
In terms of moving a little bit back now, you worked really hard. You worked really, really hard to get in. And obviously now you're taking full advantage of it. Was there anything that either you would have done differently, or any particular, because I do think that what you've said about the college choice is really important, and a lot of people don't know about that. Are there any other aspects of getting into Oxford that you think they should know about, or that is not so much common knowledge?
I would say, honestly, in hindsight, I'd say I should have stressed out less. But you can always say that in hindsight. You can't really say that when you're staring down the process and you don't know whether you're going to get in or not. But I will say, one, it's very important to consider where you're applying. And I mean this in terms of just the number of countries that you're planning to apply to as well. Because I applied to the US as well, right? That made my process very difficult because
You're super
I
intense.
had the whole pressure of this entire completely different admission system and cycle on me. And a lot of the extracurriculars I did, a lot of the extra steps I took were because of the US admissions process. And frankly, I don't regret that. I think that made me a stronger, more well-rounded person. I think that made me better positioned to take full advantage of opportunities when I came to Oxford compared to a lot of students who just applied to Oxford, Cambridge and don't do those extracurriculars. But I will say, if you are looking at this, be very clear about where you want to go and why, because engaging in both processes is difficult and it might be more beneficial if you just focus on one if you only truly care about one.
This is a really interesting point because we get the people, Rostrum, the people who are applying to the US, the people who are applying just to UK, and then those who are going for both, and then those who are going for Asia as well. So it worked for you, but you're a resilient guy. I mean, what about the workload? Overall, do you think at the moment now it's better to apply just to the UK or just to the States? I mean, if you were talking to a younger cousin or something.
I think I would definitely say it's easier to apply to the UK overall. Oxbridge is an exception. Overall, the UK application procedure is much easier, much smoother, much more simple. You need to do a lot less in the build up to that, right? You can decide to apply to the UK when you are entering your admission year and be fine. You cannot wake up one day and be
You can't be joining in your admission year for Oxford or Cambridge, do you think?
I think depending on the type of student you've been, maybe, but it's very difficult. It's a bad idea. It's an idea. It's a bad.
It's an idea.
Yeah,
it's doable, but it's.
I also, like, for example, I joined quite late in my Oxford admissions process as well. I joined halfway through my 11th grade, and I was fine because I had done a lot of the preparatory work in advance, just because those were things I'd been interested in.
Yeah, your skills building.
Yeah, that's necessary. If I had to start from scratch right then, I think it would have been a much more difficult process. But the US is not somewhere where you can just wake up and decide to apply, especially not if you're targeting any of the top 30 universities, not even top 30, top 50 universities at this point. The admissions process is insane. The sheer amount of extracurriculars and achievements you need to have before you even consider applying to these universities takes years and years and years to build up. So that's something you really have to consider from the start. And then additionally, on top of that, I'd say when you're looking at the Oxford admissions process, honestly, I think my process went about as well as it could have. I was quite happy with it. So the good takeaways from it I'd point out are: get your exams out of the way, get your head on straight, get your person statement written up at the start, because the first person statement you write is not going to have a single word from it in the person statement that you submit. So
how many drafts did we do?
I don't remember, and I don't want to. But the person statement, it's something good to get out of the way. I think they're changing that, though, aren't they?
It's changed. The personal statement has changed this year. It's into a tripartite document, so it's not as much free flowing.
Okay, so ignore all of that.
No. It is still directly applicable. It's just they've simplified it. But I do think that the enrichment and everything that you've done will come in the section 3 of the. Okay, it's too much detail, but it will come in the section 3 of the SOP. What you're saying is valid.
Okay, I would say the second thing, and this is honestly quite important, is talk to as many people as you can. Right, like. It's fine. Like, just bother them, right? If you know somebody who got in, if you know somebody who's going, if Sanjog gives you my phone number or somebody else's phone number, like, it's fine. Like, drop a message, call.
What you mean, use your network?
Yeah, use your network, use the advantages you have. Because the more you talk to people about the experience, the more you learn about it, the more you learn about life there, the better positioned you are to make choices with what college you're applying to, what course you're applying to, what your application process looks like, what you want out of it, whether or not it's even the right fit for you, because I think that's a really important thing for a lot of people to consider.
Could you expand on that a little bit?
I think Oxbridge is a incredible, very special place. I don't think it's for everyone. I think some people would thrive much better at LSE or a UCL or an Imperial, for example, or even at a St. Andrews. Some people would thrive much better in the United States. If you are the right type of a little bit obsessed, a little bit weird, Oxbridge is a very, very good place for you. But you should be sure that's what you want before you apply, because you don't want to end up at something that turned into your dream university and realize that you actually hate the way that things work out over there.
Very fair.
But I will say it's very easy to find different groups of people to fit in with and to make friends there and to do all of that. But this core running idea of people just being extremely passionate about things, especially their subjects, and wanting to, have those discussions or geek out about that all of the time, is something that is true, whether it be the rugby team or the drama kids or the student politics kids or the newsletter kids. Like, everyone's the same in that regard, even if they're doing wildly different things.
Okay, a couple of questions there. Do you think that there's greater geeking out in Cambridge than in Oxford?
No. Yeah, I think Cambridge is not worth anyone's time.
So disagree. Okay, the interesting about what about the IB versus A levels versus CBSE, and of the students who come from those backgrounds and then they get to Oxford? Is there any? Have you noticed any differences?
I haven't really noticed any difference, actually. The only difference is the IB kids tend to make a lot more jokes about how traumatized they are by their board than anyone else. That seems to be the main thing. But I think everyone sort of just adjusts to life at Oxford after a term or so, and sort of then dealing with the same problems, same issues, same academic life, same external opportunities. So it does equal out quite a lot. You shouldn't be worried about the sort of academic background you're coming from in that regard.
Okay, you've already said that the opportunities and what's available is amazing, and it's worth all of the effort for preparing and actually getting in. Everybody's all in, right? Yeah,
those 8 weeks make it a very, very intense environment, right? Everyone gets all of their energy out then and there, and like, those 8 weeks feel like they've taken 10 years to pass, but they also feel like they've passed in no time at all.
Exactly.
And frankly, like, when I come home, my parents, like, everyone in the family knows there is no waking me up for the first 2-3 days I'm back home, because that is just me catching up on my massive sleep debt.
Yeah, I completely agree. But you're getting so much out of it, and everybody gets so much out of it. I would certainly agree that it's people who have a certain intensity.
I think that is, yes.
Yeah, it's the intensity, but also the intensity in the preparation. All right, I think that's enough for them. I'm so proud of you and what you're doing, and also about the your business and where that's going. And again, that comes out of the Oxford network.
It does, yeah. It definitely is. I mean, the Cosmos, which is the AI debating startup.
The AI debating startup, Cosmos. Okay, go on.
Yes, I was introduced to John, who founded the company, through a friend of mine, through my next door neighbor and one of my best friends, because he'd been coding for him over the summer. And then it was insane, because we got Cosmos to come down to the Union. We had a debate in AI. That video is going to be up in a month or two. And it won. There were 300 people in the chamber. They voted with their feet. They voted for the robot to win. And it was incredible, because it was this masterful performance where, in this chamber where you've had Gladstone, Churchill, Reagan, Malcolm X, the Queen, like, all of these people come and speak, you had this suit of armor that we'd rented from some armor shop 4 hours away from Oxford and brought down by car, with a JBL speaker strapped inside of its head with glowing lights, being run by a computer sitting in the corner of the room somewhere, that is giving this 10-minute long speech in this historic chamber, that is getting asked question after question by a very eager crowd, and that is responding to them on the spot, on the fly, better than a lot of the human debaters could. And Cosmos, which gives students around the world the opportunity to debate online against anyone, anywhere, be judged by AI with the most comprehensive, holistic, standardized feedback that you have ever seen anywhere in the debate world, and have the ability to participate in these incredible competitions that we're building out, and in this incredible new way of debating and engaging that we're building, are using a platform that won the first ever AI debate at the Oxford Union.
No, it's a historic moment.
It is a historic moment, yes. I really look forward to that video coming out, because I think people will find it very, very entertaining.
But it is the way it's going. It's the way it's going. And I think you're going to train some great debaters in the future. And
hopefully so. Hopefully so.
Thanks so much for this. All right.
Yeah,
I really
thank you,
appreciate
Gwyn.
it. All right.
This is the best, man.
Yeah. Nice job.